Denise, there are so many people, and maybe this is true of some of the people that are watching this, who don't always take themselves seriously as a creative person. They might not even identify as being creative. And I think that it's really easy to convince ourselves that the people who are creative that we admire, that we might see on the internet, have something that we are missing and that perhaps we are unqualified or unworthy. So I love origin stories because I feel like it's a really good reminder that most successful people, like you, Denise, begin their journeys in a way that might come as a surprise. Could you share some of your beginnings with us?
Yeah. I wasn't always an illustrator artist or anything. So back in 2011, my husband's career took a change and it moved us across the state to this little town that we're in now. And so that meant I wasn't going to be working anymore and I could quit the office job that I was in. And I was really excited for my husband. This was a great opportunity for him, but it had been a huge change in our lives. There we were in this new town and I had no friends, no career, and I felt lost. And I had never really figured out what I wanted to do. I had always worked these like odd jobs to pay our bills and make ends meet. I kept thinking like, what am I going to do? And so I ended up deciding on stationery design. I came to that decision based on an idea from a print shop person that a few years prior to this, I had created photo greeting cards, and I was doing this for like family and friends and things like that. But he had said it would be a great business for me to do and, to start like doing stationery and do it on my own. Right. But I wasn't inspired to do it. And you can kind of guess how that went, right? I wasn't inspired to do it, but I was like, okay, this is what I can do. Right. So at first it was great though. And almost immediately a stationery company reached out to me and asked me to design stationery for them. And then they did purchase some of my designs and I received my very first client paycheck. Seeing that client paycheck for the first time, I would stare at it repeatedly several times a day before I ended up taking it to the bank. I felt like I wasn't lost when I looked at it. This is something somebody is willing to pay me for. Like,
Wow.
I was just, wow, okay, somebody, believes in me, right? And I decided that I could use the money to start my stationery business full time. But it quickly became really unfulfilling. I started a business that the print shop guy thought I should create, not the one that I had dreamed of building or the clients that I had wanted to work with. And so after a few years, my husband noticed my frustration. And we had gone on this date night, and I remember we had dinner, and I got in the car, and he asked me a very important but simple question. He said, "Denise, what do you want to be doing?" My answer came very easily to me in that conversation, and it was, I want to be an illustration artist and create artwork. But I said to him that I can't just create artwork. I have to be able to sell a product to make money for my art. And he said very simply, no, you don't. You can just be a designer. And when he said that, in that moment, it all clicked and I realized that my artwork is the product. So from that one date and that one important question that he asked me, I was reminded that I didn't have to do all the things right away.
What I related to most in your story was this notion of having the opportunity to do something like on your own, have your own business, but kind of doing the first thing that someone told you was possible. mine was kind of like the second part in my journey where I moved from stationary design to doing printable designs. And at the time, so this was about 10 years ago, Pinterest was just starting to explode. The DIY space was starting to explode. And those were some of the first kind of friends and people that I was connecting with online. And I thought, oh, well, this is a great opportunity. I have to pursue printables just in the same way that you had this opportunity to design stationery, and you went for it and you were successful. But I had that same moment that you did where I said, yeah, I can do this, but this isn't really exactly what I want to do. And I realized that like I am really not a DIY person at all. And I said, like, what am I doing in this space when there's probably something else creatively online that would be better suited for my interests and my skills and my talents. So I think that the question that your husband asked you, and this is where I got goosebumps in your story, like the hairs on my arm literally like stood up when I heard you say like that your husband prompted you with that question. What do you want to do, Denise? You know, we haven't gotten to the rest of your story yet, but I think that this is the turning point because he said that, but then you were brave enough to give him an answer and just come out and say what it is that you wanted to do. And before we move on from this, I'm going to challenge anyone who's watching this right now and throw it your way and ask you to ponder that question. Like, what is it that you really want to do that maybe you haven't said yet, or that maybe someone hasn't asked you? Because it would be cool if you could create one of these turnaround moments for yourself if you feel like you need one. So if you're feeling brave, share your answer with us in the comments. But if you're, if you're not comfortable, write it down or please share it with someone who you do trust. Because Denise had to turn around when she was brave enough to do this. I had to turn around when I was brave enough to face up to the fact that I was not completely going in the right direction. There's power in those simple questions. So Denise, at this point, this is great. You had your big declaration, but saying it can only take you so far. Now it's time to do the work and start to figure out how you are going to be positioning your artwork as the product. Because it sounds like you had just convinced yourself, like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
So how did you do it?
Yeah, so I didn't do it right away. Just like, anything, there's, things in life. We ended up having another baby and a little girl. But I still had that back in my mind, that conversation with my husband. And I did start to work towards it. Actually, one day at a time, I did start to make progress on that. But around 2015, I decided to focus on becoming an illustration artist. And to grow my illustration skills, I took a bunch of design classes to further my knowledge of Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop, and I learned surface pattern design. But I also wanted to learn to paint with traditional mediums like watercolor. And at this point, our baby girl was a toddler. And so I was learning to paint during her nap times and at night after everybody went to bed when I had a chance, just these little moments of time that I had for myself. And so I remember one day I was trying to paint a watercolor wreath, and it was not great. It was really bad, actually. And it's actually still on my Instagram account. If you scroll all the way down, that wreath is still there. But over time, as I consistently put in the work to develop my skills, I realized something very important, that I didn't have to create like everyone else. I didn't like painting wreaths all in one sitting. So I don't know if you've ever tried to do that, but it just wasn't like my way of doing it. It didn't click for me. And I loved painting individual illustrations that I could put together later because it gave me the most flexibility, and it gave me the chance to paint the whole plant and not just a small grouping of plants together. So I could make mistakes. I could try different pieces. I could iterate the design, you know, and this was transformational for me in my process because it meant that I could build revision into my creative process. And at this point, our daughter was old enough for preschool, and it was time to get her involved with other activities besides just hanging out with mommy all day. So you know, at the time we only did preschool 2 days a week for her, but she absolutely loved going for the few hours a week, and I loved the time to focus on work. So it gave us a chance to kind of, you know, do our own thing, and she made a bunch of friends, and I got to, you know, focus on, you know, my creative skill set. So then I decided that it was time to actually start making an income with my artwork and put it out in the world. So I did. So I think this is where you and I kind of like
Our paths
intersect.
crossed. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
paths crossed because I began putting my artwork on marketplaces and selling it as an illustration artist, and that's kind of, you know, where we where we found each other, right?
Yeah, I was one of Denise's customers when I was
Yeah.
creating printables. Do not have an illustration background or a skill set, so I really depended on artists like Denise to find illustrations that were already done and then be able to incorporate them into my designs with typography for invitations and art prints and so on. So, I mean, Denise, you're always one of my favorite illustrators. And then we were able to connect in an online group that I think our mutual friend Dawn Nicole started.
Yep,
So
yep,
thank you,
yep.
Dawn, for connecting us. And yeah, I'm so grateful that I've had the you know, the opportunity to know you both as the shop, like before I even knew like the person behind it, but then to kind of get to know you on a personal level and see the behind the scenes and the process and to see really how much they match up because your work I feel like is at this like extraordinarily high level of quality because as I mentioned like at this time I was purchasing from a bunch of different artists and you know now being able to match up seeing your process it all makes sense like why your work is so good.
You know, it's so funny because like, you know, you're on there, you know, you were purchasing my artwork, but like for me, there were so many what ifs in my mind, like putting that artwork out there. Like, you know, what if somebody has an issue using it? What if another client wants to license it and can't because some other people bought it? And the list of what ifs like completely went on, right? But I did it anyway because ultimately it was my artwork. I could do what I wanted with it. And at this point in time, it was only sitting on my desk. It wasn't on any products, which was what I wanted, right? Was to get my artwork on products. And so for me, within 6 months of putting my artwork on marketplaces, I had fully funded my business for a whole year and I was able to write myself paychecks from selling my artwork. So, I mean, that was like a big turning point for me. It was like, wow, okay, I need to keep just doing what I'm doing, right? So, but I also worked with several additional clients as a freelancer, and I was creating artwork, both in Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. But I wasn't exactly pitching clients starting out. I was just getting started. But clients were finding me on a regular basis because I wasn't keeping my artwork in a desk drawer. I was sharing it in a big way publicly where people could actually purchase and use my artwork. So, and the artwork that I created then has been licensed to people like you, but also by brands and used on their products worldwide. So it was a great entry point for me and to really start.
To be able to fund your business is really exceptional. I think that this is something that doesn't really get talked about a lot is that most businesses fail in their first years, and most of them don't end up making a profit in the sense of money that you get to keep, because it does cost money to run a business, and we need to invest in things like tools and programs. And when all of that is said and done, sometimes we're left with not very much. So that was great that you were not only able to like kind of get this rhythm going and this system going, but then to have the clients at that point, I'm sure felt like kind of like a bonus.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, because what I really wanted to be working with brands. I really wanted to be licensing my work to brands and working with them to get my artwork on products. And so, that was initially, my goal, but I had to start somewhere.
I think what I love most about this part of this last part of the story that you told was that you were encountering so many of these what if moments, which is, I know for me, something that I have experienced throughout my entire career. But I do think it's important to not pretend that that's not happening. I think on my ends, I kind of like to call them out. So I'll share kind of what I'm experiencing like at this point in on my creative journey. And my big what if has been, since the last couple of years, there have been a lot of changes on social media. I mentioned 10 years ago, the Pinterest boom. The amount of traffic that my site was getting in those first years was like wonderful, like off the charts. But at the time, I thought it was just normal. And since so many new people have been coming online over in those last 10 years, but especially in these last 3 years, I think attentions have been divided. And this is the case for not just small businesses, but big businesses as well. I think that this is an issue that we're all contending with. But one struggle I've really been having is to not take that. I don't want to say not take it personally, but my big what if every time I go to create a piece of content or share something online is, what if all of this is for nothing? Because I feel like I care and I pour so much time and love into everything I create. Just like you said, Denise, like this is the thing that lights you up. So now I have found this thing that I love doing that lights me up. I love creating audio and video content and inspiring other creative people to really figure out what that thing is for them, and to encourage them to keep going, which may sound ironic for what I'm saying right now. But there's this what if that, like, what if no one ever sees this, whether it's the algorithm or there's just not an interest in it, and like, is it even worth it in the end? So for the audience, if that's something that you also struggle with, give me a cosign in the comments, or it might be helpful and maybe a little therapeutic to either share with us or share with, with a friend or a trusted person in your life. What is the biggest what if for you that you feel like is kind of standing in the way of you moving forward? But once we get those what ifs out of our system, we need to do what Denise did and recognize them, but don't let that affect our progress. Because if we do let them get in the way and we stop, that is like the surefire way to miss out on the opportunities that are waiting for us. So Denise, because you kept saying yes and you kept showing up, you had this cool thing happen where brands started to reach out to you. You weren't at this time pitching yourself to anyone.
No, I had just kind of started. So I didn't even know about pitching to brands at that point. It wasn't even something that had like occurred to me, because I was just like beginning to figure it out and put my work out there and built a website and did all those things. But this was the beginning for me. So, but they were contacting me because of the work I had put online on those different marketplaces, on my blog, on Pinterest, like you said, on Pinterest. And clients began to find me, and I was open to doing custom work in addition to licensing my artwork and selling it online. Though one of my biggest fears I had when I decided to start working as an illustration artist came to be. So, we all have these fears, right? And these self-doubts. And so, the brands were licensing my artwork and patterns and hiring me to create custom artwork that they needed for their products. And, but remember, this is the thing I wanted the most. And then there was this fear I had, or, self-doubt, whatever you want to call it. And I think you will always have self-doubt. You always have that. But if your drive and you're not letting those what-ifs and those self-doubts be louder, than your drive to move forward, you're always going to move forward. So that's kind of what I try to tell myself. If I have those self-doubts, I'm like, okay, that my push to move forward needs to be louder than those self-doubts. But the fear I had was, what if I can't draw what they need me to draw? So it was like, what if I can't do it? As I was working with more and more clients, I realized though that they were hiring me to create the kind of work I had already been sharing. So, the kind of work that I already knew how to create was florals and animals. So after working with one of my biggest clients who licensed artwork I had already created, he invited me to work on a huge custom project. It was like 11-month project. And it was called Around the World for his game with a bunch of other incredible pattern designers. And so it also came at a time in 2020 when COVID began and we were all, stuck at home and feeling very uncertain. And as I was working on the project, I had this nagging feeling. I really wanted to use my iPad and Procreate, but I had started out with hand-painted watercolor work and I wasn't sure if I should switch mediums in the middle of the project. So I had my iPad for probably maybe a year. I don't know, not quite. So, and I was still trying to figure things out with it. I had made some pattern collections with it and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't, I was integrating it into my process and still feeling kind of unsure, right? So I really wanted to use my iPad and Procreate. And I knew based on my experience that Procreate had streamlined the artwork creation process for me and allowed me to basically take my phased approach to drawing that I had established years ago to a whole new level, right? I could easily have revision in my workflow with the ability to sketch and illustrate right there on the iPad in layers. And I had been doing this, phase approach traditionally on paper, but this became way easier on Procreate. I wasn't having to use a light box and, tracing paper and things like that. So it was faster. So the phases gives you steps to follow as you're creating. The phased approach brought me incredible confidence because I was seeing where I needed to make changes in my drawings. And it also forced me to stop in my revising as well, because I only allow myself up to 3 sketches in my process. So I kind of cut myself off. I'm like, okay, this is it, you're done. But back to that fear part, then I got to the point in this project where I needed to create the kind of artwork that I had never drawn before. But I knew this project was different when I started it, and that drawing things outside of my normal subject of florals and animals was definitely going to happen in this project. So I knew this going in, but I was ready for it. I knew I could draw castles and dragons and playful penguins in Antarctica because of the artwork workflow I had created for myself. I drew magical castles that spoke of fairy tales in Germany and wondrous dragons in Thailand and penguins in Antarctica that throw snowballs because, I was designing for my clients' customers and creating a connection with my artwork that tells a story of wondrous adventures. We need to realize that our artwork, it is a form of connection. It tells a story, it sets a scene, and it speaks to your clients' customers. If you're creating artwork for your own brand or a client, it is for the customers and it is for what they believe, they hold true, their values, and what they want to experience when buying products with your artwork on it. And for me, it was learning how to set a scene with floral artwork that got me to the point of being able to create artwork with a deeper meaning and message. And once you know how to set, the scene, from there you can begin to tell stories with your artwork, and the floral scenery is the beginning of the story unfolding.
It's cool to kind of hear how you had these like two sides to it. One was kind of the more mechanical process that you really learned early on before you even moved over to Procreate, but those steps and the revisions and the fact that you kind of gave yourself this parameter of, starting with 3 sketches, it sounds like you kind of had this really good workflow and foundation to work from that could really be applied anywhere. I mean, you did Procreate, but it really could be applied to any either, by hand medium or digital medium. So it seems like this project kind of reached you at just the right time where it kind of made you step up to the plate and challenge yourself to now take these things that you had already mastered and now see if you could apply it in the same way to these new forms, like the castles and the dragons and the different places, which is I mean, the way that you told it, it really, the whole experience and the timing that it happened really did feel like serendipity somehow.
Yeah. I mean, it's having, a process that you can follow that makes you feel comfortable in what you're doing, really, and realizing that for me, like, it's just something that I did and that I developed over time, these steps that I use for creating artwork. And I call these steps to the artwork to products workflow now, and I teach them in my course. My course is called Florals to Products. But the 5 steps for creating artwork for me are theme, vision, story, creation, and then development. Theme and vision are doing your research, gathering inspiration, and figuring out who you're creating the artwork for. And the story piece is putting it together in a way that there is a story of adventure and connection that you can build from and inspire not only you in the creation process, but also, the customers as well with this underlying story. And I teach this in the first module of the course. And the creation part, though, is where you are actually doing the illustration work and creating the elements based on your research. And, I teach how to create a mood board and things like that and how to find inspiration. And then you move into the development step where you take your artwork and develop it in a way that you can use on products. But what is key here is not just the steps, but combining the steps with a method for revision built into my creation process. So, and that's what took me time to figure out. And it's something that I want to help my students achieve in the 6 weeks of the course, is not having to figure that all out.
This is interesting because I mentioned I had seen your work kind of from like a front end view of being one of your customers. I've gotten to know you and kind of knowing what you're working on, but I've never like sat next to you while you've been creating. And I don't think I've ever seen a workflow like this before with this emphasis on revision. And I can see how powerful that is because it kind of speaks in a way to these doubts that we have, and it's kind of like your antidote to it. It's like, okay, we know that we will need to revise, and this is the way to do it in order to keep that momentum and to keep going forward. Because I think for any artist who's watching this, or any creative person, like, we can just, spin around in circles and just have endless revisions, because there is really no concrete way of knowing, like, okay, like this is now finished. So the fact that you were able to develop this system that does give you that parameter and does help you move forward is so powerful. And I think it just kind of speaks to or explains why your work is so incredibly rich. I mean, you have a great process behind it. But I also wanted to mention earlier, for this game project, elements like the castles and the dragons. And I know in your earlier work, you've done things like mermaids. Your mermaid collection is one of my favorites. So in thinking about creating your course and how you're going to share your knowledge and your process with other artists, and to position them for success in the way that you've experienced, what made you choose Florals as the foundation and really the center of your course?
I chose Florals because they are essential for story setting and artwork. They set the scene, they bring nature in, and they foster a way to grow your skill set in a beautiful way without having to know how to draw anything else starting out. In my course, I have created a space for students to guide them from an idea to a finished product design with a workflow for creativity using Procreate and Adobe Photoshop. I teach the steps of revising that, so you don't get stuck and you're not constantly like, oh, I need to fix this here, I need to fix this there. It's spotting where you really need to make adjustments, making those adjustments, and then moving on.
I mentioned earlier in our conversation that I lack illustration skills, but between hearing about your process and actually seeing the inside of this course, I mean, you're making me want to go out and buy an iPad and start doing this, even just as a kind of, fun thing. Like, yes, this could certainly be a career for something, but I also think that this could be a really great, fulfilling, like, hobby and something to do in your downtime. I could see it going either way, but I'd love to hear from you. What is your aim for your students or anyone who might want to explore taking this?
I want my students to experience what I experienced. I want my students to have a transformative experience in their creative process as a result of this course. So this space that I've created for students who are committed to putting in the work needed to help get them there. So, I am a self-taught artist, and I found my own way, and I couldn't find all the answers starting out. And even though I was Googling it, and Google was my best friend at the time, there was a lot of trial and error, and I want to save my students a lot of that.
Denise, you bring up this great point when it comes to Googling. And I, as an entrepreneur, I love that we have all of these resources at our fingertips between Google and YouTube. But there is one thing, maybe it'll come in the future, because I know that they're advancing every day. But one thing that Google has not been able to offer us yet, and that is the answer to those what if questions, because we can Google all day, but then we still second guess ourselves. And then we don't take action. So in thinking about, signing up for courses, I think one of the most valuable parts of your course is that it comes with you, with your experience and your support. So those moments when students are moving along and they're taking their lessons, if they get stuck, and you will, that's a completely normal part of learning a new skill. When you're doubting yourself, that you're not going to stay stuck, because you have this support that you're going to need to keep going. So Denise's husband, I feel like we should have him pop in here for a little, like, a cameo, but he asked.
I know, I talk about it all the time.
He asked that great question at the beginning of your story, which is, what do you want to do? And if your answer was, I want to do what Denise is doing, and like I really feel like a part of me is the person who is saying that right now, then your next action step should be an easy one. If you're watching this during an open enrollment period, you can sign up for Denise's course, which is called Florals for Products, using the link below, or you can jump on the waiting list and then join up next time that it is reopened to new students. And I am a proud affiliate of Denise's program. So if you do sign up using the links below, Denise will generously share a commission with me. I've not only seen the inside of this course, but I've had the joy of watching Denise develop this program it's taken over a year to completely develop this program. So you know a lot of love and thought has gone into it. And if you've seen the quality of Denise's illustrations, that is every bit the level that you're going to expect to see inside of your course portal. So click below and go check it out.